Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of Acting Up with Tom. Today we're going to be talking about the snare of legalism. So, what is legalism, real quick? Legalism is when we take a man made law and elevate it to the level of divine God given law. What does that mean and what does this cause to happen? Well, keep watching to find out. So, the problem with legalism is this, that when we take man, who we are imperfect, sinful human beings, and we make our own laws, and then we try to make them like they're the level of God's laws, we're going to end up with imperfect laws. Notice that God is the only one who is able to give us a perfect rule book, and ultimately, we can't even follow that. So, what gives us a good standing on being able to follow a bunch of laws that we create ourselves? So, essentially, let's look at this real quick. When we're saved by grace through faith in Jesus Christ, right? And that grace by faith, not by works, is how we're saved. And once we're saved, we're believers. And what we're doing at this point, now that we're believers, is we're basically trying to get through life to be more like Christ. And scenarios are happening, and we're reading the Bible, and we're realizing we need to do this, and we're trying to figure it all out, and it's complicated. And so what legalism does is it makes things black and white. But the problem is, the Bible really isn't black and white. There's not a lot of black and white things. Like, let's give a prime example. Men dressing like men and women dressing like women. It seems black and white under legalism, but in reality, that's really hard. Let me give you an example. In a legalistic church, men dressing like men means men wear pants and suits and stuff like that, and women dressing like women mean women only wear dresses and skirts. Men don't wear skirts, women don't wear pants. But here's the issue. In Scotland, men wear skirts, and in Greece, men wear skirts as well. In the Middle East, men are wearing the same kind of robes that women are, but there's just, micro differences that show the difference, usually the head coverings. And then you have, back in the ancient days, women wearing pants as warriors, and in China as well. And when these laws were written in the Bible, well, men and women were wearing tunics. There was some differences between them, but, those differences were to differentiate man from woman. But this pants are for men and dresses are for women, we notice comes from when the holiness movement started, around late 1800s, early 1900s. Because at that point in culture, men wore pants and women wore dresses, right? The issue is that when a lot of these legalistic and holiness movement churches started, that was like the cultural thing. But then as time went on, World War II happened, and what happened is women started wearing pants. And one of the chief reasons women started wearing pants is because, well, they started working. And if you've ever worked in a factory, wearing loose-fitting, flowy clothing is not what you want to do around mechanical things. So women started wearing pants because they had to start working. It was more convenient, and it was probably safer. So what happened was there was kickback from the legalism people who were saying, no, you're not being modest anymore because you're wearing pants now. But that's a misunderstanding of modesty. See, biblical modesty is based on the heart, right? So I could wear this shirt, but if my point of wearing this shirt is because I know women are going to look at me and think I'm hot, then I'm wearing this modest shirt immodestly. Right? Now, if I wear this shirt outside like I normally do, like, oh, this is just a chill t-shirt, that's not immodest. Same thing with women wearing pants. If a girl goes out and wears a pair of jeans and she's like, the reason I'm wearing jeans is because it's easier for me to get my job done and it's safer, and honestly, it's just what I had in my closet, that's not being immodest. If a woman goes to wear a pair of jeans to be, flaunting it off and all that stuff, well, then that's immodest. And so that's where we're talking about that gray zone, that it depends. Modesty is based on the heart of the believer. And how do we get from modesty to what women and men should wear? Well, they're kind of intertwined, right? So modesty is honestly one of the reasons why a lot of legalistic people might say women shouldn't wear pants. But the problem is modesty is about the heart. And if they try to say, okay, well, it's not a woman's clothing, well, it is now. Pants are perfectly acceptable to wear as women's clothing, and you can't pull that pants aren't acceptable as women's clothing from the Bible in any way, or you would be committing exegesis, which is essentially putting your beliefs into the Bible. And so this is what legalism does. Legalism says, okay, we have man-made laws, right? So how do we differentiate men and women? Well, one guy says, okay, well, women are always wearing dresses, men are always wearing pants. Women should never wear pants, men should never wear dresses. And then they say, okay, that's what the Bible is telling us to do. Whoa, let's back up a second. The Bible never said women have to wear dresses and men have to wear pants. It just said women dress like women, men dress like men. As the definition of what men and women's clothing has changed for practical reasons and other reasons over time, that interpretation of that rule has also been able to be fluid because it's a gray zone rule. Women's clothing is a gray zone. Men's clothing is a gray zone. High heels, I'm pretty sure, were originally invented for horseback riding, but now women wear them. And if I wore high heels, that'd be weird, right? Like those elevated shoes were to help you get up on the stirrup on the horse for men. And then women wore them now as a fashion statement. So that just shows how clothing can swap, right? Clothing can swap meanings. And so what legalism does is it makes a black and white out of it. It says, this is black and white. There's women's clothing and there's men's clothing, and we're going to make them into lists. And the way it does this is by taking the man-made list and saying this is what the Bible teaches, taking that man-made law and elevating it to divine. But at the end of the day, the Bible doesn't tell, like, example, what women's clothing and men's clothing are. The Bible doesn't give examples of modest and immodest clothing. Modesty, number one, is a behavior of the heart. So any piece of clothing can be immodest. Now, there are some articles of clothing that are just never going to be modest no matter what. That's perfectly fine. But to say that, like, jeans are one of them, that's pushing it to the extreme. To say that men wearing shorts is immodest, that's pushing things to an extreme. And that's where legalism comes in. It's that extreme when men make a law and they elevate it to God's level. And they say, no, this isn't my law, this is God's law. That's when you know you're snared into legalism. When you have somebody saying the reason you have to wear pants and never shorts as a man is because that's what makes God happy and that's modest, that's men making their law God's law. And that's dangerous. And that snares you into a trap. And what's that trap? Well, let's look at the Bible real quick. Hold on, let me turn on my computer. Let's look in the Bible and see a parable that Jesus told. He also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and regard others with contempt. 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, was praying thus, God, I thank you that I am not like other people, thieves, rogues, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week, I give 1/10 of all my income, but the tax collector, standing far off, would not even look up to heaven, but was beating his breast and saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his home justified rather than the other. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, but all who humble themselves will be exalted. So this isn't to say that anyone who, like women wearing skirts, are doing it to exalt themselves. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the snare of legalism, the snare of black and white Christianity, of elevating man's law to God's law, is you start creating arrogance, right? Because now you have a church filled with women who are told that skirts make you a woman and pants are men's only attire. And so when a woman comes in who's a devout Christian wearing pants, you now have the mindset of, oh, if she would just wear skirts, she would be she'd be a true Christian. I've seen that mindset develop. She would be a better Christian. Or, oh, the reason Susie doesn't wear skirts is because, she's just not close enough to the Lord yet. That's the same mentality that these Pharisees are having. Because what you're saying is that I'm closer to the Lord because of what I'm wearing. This woman isn't. That's the mentality legalism starts. That's why legalism is dangerous. That's the snare of legalism. The snare of legalism is that it pulls you in to making Christianity black and white, and what you think you're doing to be better to God and to be a better Christian is actually causing you to look onto contempt with your other Christians, like this Pharisee was doing to this tax collector. And look at the tax collector here. The tax collector truly understood what it meant to be before God, and this Pharisee didn't, right? So this Pharisee, who thought he was so much better than the tax collector, was actually in a worse spiritual state than the tax collector, but he thought he was better because he was following the man-made laws of the Pharisees. So ultimately, guys, what I'm getting at is that if you're in a church that preaches legalism, the danger of that isn't that you're not being a good Christian, because you can be a good Christian and follow strict standards. The danger is that legalism leads to arrogance. And no matter how humble you try to be about it, the second you say that to be a good Christian, you do this, and to be a not good Christian, this is what you do, you've created a level of arrogance because you've taken a man-made definition. What is a good Christian? Well, the biblical definition is somebody who tries to be like Christ, somebody who believes in Christ, somebody who loves God and loves their neighbor, right? So if somebody's doing those things, they're a good Christian. But what legalism does, again, is it takes its man-made, it says, okay, well, that's not enough. They have to be wearing skirts if they're a woman and never wear shorts if they're a man. All this extra stuff to be a good Christian is when legalism is going to create arrogance. You can't fully be in legalism and also say, no, I'm not arrogant. Because the second you believe legalism, you believe that it's black and white, you believe that there's certain things Christians have to do, you're going to eventually, naturally start looking down on Christians who aren't doing those things. Because, for example, if as a woman you think you have to wear skirts, what are you going to think of people who don't? And if you're thinking, oh, well, they're a less mature Christian, well, you don't know their heart. They may be praying and fasting every day. They may look at themselves and be ministering to hundreds a day. The problem is that legalism looks at the surface of a person and says that's what makes you a good Christian. True Christianity looks at the inside. So guys, I just wanted to say in this episode, be careful of legalism. A lot of churches are falling into it, and it's very easy because I fell into it. And it wasn't until I really started reading the Bible and asking God to move in my life that God showed me that legalism was causing me to be arrogant. And legalism will cause everybody to be arrogant. True humility won't make you think you're better than anyone. What it'll be is that I have my walk with God and they have theirs. But legalism causes this competition of I'm a better Christian than them, or I'm a more mature Christian than them because of what I'm doing and because of what I'm wearing. That's dangerous. And that's going to lead you down a wrong path, and a path where you're getting farther from Christ as opposed to closer. Legalism is going to drive you away from Jesus, and it's going to harden your heart to him just as it did the Pharisees. I love you guys. Thank you so much for watching. And just remember, legalism is dangerous and we need to stay away from it. Have a good one, guys. Bye-bye.